have you join us on Inside. On Inside today, very first one for the year 2020. Lizzie?
It's nice to be here in the year 2020.
Today on the program, we shall be looking at West Africa. To be precise, the ECO. What's happening in your segment?
Well, on the media review segment, we shall be taking a look at the common currency called the ECO. This has been introduced by the West African Monetary Policy for the framework of ECOWAS. Now, what does this portend for the African countries, especially those Anglophones?
And you know very well the media has a role to play here.
Of course.
So we shall be interests involved in it.
Yes. Okay. So how do we make the ordinary Nigerian African understands what this is all about? Are we going to play down just the jingles? Are we coming up with features? How do we set the agenda for Africans to know, to understand what this portend for us as a continent? These are some of the gray areas we're taking a look at on the segment.
Okay. On discussion segment, we shall still be looking at the ECO. Where are we with it? Some say that the intrigues is an upstage, it's a stab on Nigeria. Should Nigeria pull out at this stage, or what should Nigeria do? We hear Nigeria has the biggest economy, not just in West Africa, but Africa. If you talk about Africa, Nigeria is first. So with all this playing out, what is Nigeria's position? Should we chicken out or should we stay? We'll get to know on discussion segment. That's about that on Inside. As we say, up next on the program is the discussion segment. Don't go away. The idea was mooted. It became an initiative. Conversations were held, consultations held, and indeed, towards taking off, addendums were put up. Nigeria particularly said, through Mr. President said, a lot of care should be taken, not to be taken in a hurry. That is towards the ECOWAS common currency. And indeed, today, we have the ECO adopted as the ECOWAS common currency in West Africa. But a lot of things have happened since after then. The French-speaking countries have jettisoned the franc CFA for the ECO as an adopted currency, and questions are being asked. Why? What happened? What do we stand to lose? What do we stand to gain in all this? Also, the other face of it is the convergence criteria. Where are we with it? That's the focus of this segment of Inside. Matters arising regarding the ECO currency in West Africa. My guests, Ken Ukaoha. Ken Ukaoha is a trade lawyer, president, National Association of Nigerian Traders, ECOWAS consultant, and also an expert on regional economic integration. Thanks for joining me on the program.
Thank you very much, Obene.
Samson Simon Galadima is an economist, researcher, and economic analyst. Good to have you on the program.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. We will not go into the issue how ECO came about, but let's dig up from where we are now. ECO has been agreed, takeoff date 2020, but the particular month we don't know. But even before now, we had all happen. Give us an update.
All right, thank you very much. Let me say that the updates I may be given will not be an official update because I'm not speaking on behalf of ECOWAS. Who are supposed to be the ones to officially lay down an update on this matter. But be that as it may, as people, as those who are by the side, and by the way, I attended the technical meeting, experts meeting, the second week of December, just last month, which preceded the ministerial meeting that now preceded the ECOWAS Heads of States meeting, which held in Abuja on the 21st of December. Now, that experts meeting held in Conakry in Guinea. And of course, member states looked at the criteria, the convergence criteria, and also looked at the journey so far, over 30 years of these preparations. And it was agreed finally by the heads of states on the 21st of December here in Abuja, as I did mention, that a currency which was approved by the ministerial committee, the ministerial council rather, would be given the name ECO. And then a symbol also came into being on that day. I think it is important, perhaps at this point, to lay this. If your camera can catch this,
let's go ahead.
Here is the symbol EC.
EC, okay. Yeah.
Now, then that symbol, after the symbol, it was also agreed that there will be a creation of a central bank for West Africa. So these are the key principles that we approved upon. And today, what we saw was that the UEMOA countries, the 8 countries of the UEMOA, Cote d'Ivoire, Niger, Togo, Benin, Burkina Faso, Senegal, and Mali, who have been using, they have been using, and then Guinea, they have been using Guinea-Bissau, they have been using CFA, the franc CFA, now accepted to adopt ECO as their currency. And again, what we saw was that the current president of, the current chairman of UEMOA, Alassane Ouattara, the president Alassane Ouattara, who is the president of Cote d'Ivoire, sitting by its side, side by side, just like I am sitting with my colleague here, announced this, that UEMOA currency, the franc CFA, will now be, adopted. That ECO will be adopted in, if you like, in substitution of the CFA. But what troubled some of us by the side is that there was a comment that the ECO will now be linked and tied to euro. Again, for some people like us, we now felt that that was not part of the agreement there. Of course, we know that, as the UEMOA chairman, he has that right to announce what they had agreed upon. But that, to the extent that that announcement would have stopped at that point diplomatically. However, the extension of this announcement to, linking that with euro was not agreed upon, and therefore was an extra, tendency, if you like, an extra projection of a diplomatic, strategy beyond the territories of the agreement of the ECOWAS heads of
So
states.
if I ask a very simple question, what is the implication of that kind of a reaction?
Well,
or development?
that kind of reaction, that kind of action, rather, provokes reaction. And, again, if you watched what happened, it wasn't over, just about 3-4 days, and then the Ghanaian authorities sent out a press release, consenting to that, concurring and supporting and asking other member states to also support that. But a few of us have also made some calls among the Francophone, countries, and then Ghana, and asked what has happened. Was this agreed upon, beyond the name ECO? Was there any time that an agreement was made to latch this on euro? And everybody appears to be surprised. Now, again, nothing would have really, spiked any kind of confusion or, surprise if Macron, the president of, France, had just sat down there to announce that, look, from this time forth, we know that CFA is a product of, France, and now that ECO has been adopted, and for this purpose, it appears we are letting go. But the tie-in of this, again, I mentioned, the tie-in of the ECO to the euro, again, make a lot of people get surprised. Okay. Now, this surprise, and the question you asked, the surprise would now begin to, provoke some questions. Number one, beyond the subject of this was not agreed upon, is France trying to extend her territories, her governance, her boundaries beyond the 8-member UMOA to a 15-member country of ECOWAS? That's the first question.
Let me hold you there.
Thank you.
Now, you have heard it. What implication for Nigeria? Gain, lose.
All right. The adoption of the ECO is meant to reduce trade barriers, like currency obstacles are meant to be removed, and is meant to ensure that transaction costs are reduced. And because of these two things, is supposed to bolster growth within the sub-region and possibly improve living standards of the peoples of the different countries in West Africa. But the Francophone countries, alongside France, upstaging the Anglophone countries, going ahead to announce, because the original plan was the West African Monetary Zone, which has the 6 Anglophone countries, as well as Guinea, Conakry. We're supposed to adopt the ECO ahead of the CFA franc countries. But the new development shows that they have actually gone ahead to do it ahead of, that's WAMO, the West African Economic and Monetary Zone. Now, the Francophone countries have gone ahead to adopt it ahead of the Anglophone countries. So we are likely going to miss out on the benefits, the economic benefits. The transaction costs will still be there for us because we have not adopted the ECO yet. So we still have to change for Nigeria the Naira to the ECO before we can do any transaction with any country that is using the ECO. And trade barriers will still be there. And because of these trade barriers, our growth, the growth that is meant to be derived from adopting.
Trade barriers will still be there. What happens to the ECOWAS Free Movement Treaty?
No, like when you have different currencies, it's not actually optimal for you to have to change currency before you do any transaction.
Okay.
It's better when you use the same currency.
Okay.
It's more optimal.
Okay.
So because it's still, the barrier is still there, so it's going to affect us economically.
How?
All right. There's this currency risks. If you're trading with a country, you have to change your currency to their currency, directly or indirectly. So there's this fluctuation in the value of currencies. So you cannot guarantee that what you have today is going to be the same tomorrow. So it creates this uncertainty. And when there is uncertainty in any economy, it diminishes investor confidence. It reduces consumer confidence as well.
Okay, beautiful. Now, I know very well one other caveat to it is the convergence criteria. And 1 or 2 countries are very close to it. Yet, some people like here use the word upstaged others. What happens to all this? Even if they have upstaged without meeting the convergence criteria, can they move on with it?
Now, I think one mistake we might be heading to is circumventing that convergence criteria. And I think I've spelled this very clearly out. If we do not meet the convergence criteria, we must progressively move towards it.
Are you talking about Nigeria now?
Every country in West Africa, all the 15-member countries that are coming into this union, the currency union. Now, we must also define for ourselves what kind of currency union do we want. Now, the heads of states adopted that they want a central bank of West Africa. The question that would come immediately would be, what happens to the individual member countries' central banks? Secondly, what happens to the monetary policies of these individual 15-member countries? Thirdly, what happens to the macroeconomic policies? Because currency is an instrument or a vessel for monitoring and regulating whether it is macroeconomic, which is a very large one, all the indicators and indices there, macroeconomic policies, as well as monetary policy. For instance, if there is a currency crash, what happens to the economy of West Africa? And given essentially for Nigeria, let me come back home here, that Nigeria has about 67% of West Africa's economy, number one. Number two, in terms of GDP, Nigeria is the highest. In fact, the 8 member countries of the UMOA constitute or contribute 32% of the entire GDP of West Africa. Now you see where Nigeria falls. Now, number three is that in terms of population, Nigeria is about 2/3 of the population of the entire West Africa. West Africa has a population of about 350 million people. And out of that, over 200 million belong to Nigeria. So Nigeria is the market. He talked about market here and trade barriers. So Nigeria is the one here. So that means if there's any shock on any economy, courtesy of a unified currency, first it will bounce on the shoulder of the huge man. And who is the huge man? Nigeria. And that's why we need to be a bit more careful in all of these aspirations. But importantly is this, that the single currency for trade in West Africa is a very good thing, very commendable effort. No matter what anybody does or says about it or thinks, strategically, we need a single currency. Why? We need a single currency to ease trade. The more the merrier. Two, we need a single currency also in order to promote productivity. What do I mean? Because if we don't have a single currency, what you see is that our trade will be shrinking. Trade, intra-regional trade at this time, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Not just trade.
I'll come to that. Samson, what do you make of what he said? Nigeria has 67% of the West African economy.
Yes.
Population, I'm calling population-wise and what have you. Now, with what has happened, if it is allowed to go on, like he uses word, the big man that is Nigerian will be affected. What should Nigeria do in this instance? To walk out? To pull out? What should Nigeria do? That we gain back what we should control?
Yes. I think Nigeria is, like he said, using his words now, is a huge man. We are 2/3 of the economy of West Africa. So we are like the elephant in the room. They cannot afford to ignore us. I think what they're trying to do is to compel us with a fait accompli. Like, we have already gone far. This is what we have always wanted to do. And we have started. Is also a means.
Nigeria will follow them?
Yes. Because Nigeria will be left with no choice than that's what they feel. Because this is something that we're supposed to do together, all the countries in West Africa. It has been the pipeline for so long, and Nigeria has been fully part of the arrangement and has been in full agreement. Then suddenly now they did this. So they're trying to subdue Nigeria, because one of the things they are considering is, should we do this together? Nigeria is likely going to monopolize. We are likely going to dominate.
Okay, but let me ask this. What if with all what they have done, Nigeria decides, okay, fine, after consulting with people like you,
yes,
Ken has been in the whole thing, ECOWAS consultant, you are an economist, and Nigeria says, okay, fine, we'll pull out. We don't want to be part of it.
All right.
I'm just asking.
Nigeria has that choice. We should not be stampeded into.
What's the future of ECO?
All right. The ECO will not be as powerful as it is meant to be.
Okay.
The advantages of the ECO will not be as much as if it's not going to be as much without Nigeria. They need Nigeria for the ECO to be the powerful currency it is meant to be, because we are really huge in terms of population. We are really huge in terms of the economy. So they actually need us. But they don't want us to come and dominate things. Maybe that's why they did that, so that when we come, we just be one of the members. They don't want a situation whereby Nigeria dominates the monetary policy, Nigeria dominates the macroeconomy. So with this now, if Nigeria doesn't join, they have something they can work with. But if Nigeria should join now, Nigeria cannot come and dominate everybody the way it would have been if Nigeria was at the beginning when it was adopted. If Nigeria was part of it when the ECO was adopted.
I love this
alongside other
Ken, do you
countries.
agree with that?
No, well, I would rather put a caveat. I would not advise Nigeria to withdraw. This is diplomacy.
Will that be defeatist or what?
I think it's not defeatist. Sometimes in diplomacy, that's what we call strategic diplomacy. And that strategic diplomacy sometimes requires some level of silence. You allow them to play the game and you are watching them. It's just like, see, don't look, but you are watching. Mm-hmm. But you have the red card in your pocket. And of course, when they want to say, last card, you're already putting check-up, if you understand that. Now, let me get back. Now, Nigeria would not, as the biggest economy, let loose our economy like that to be dribbled. And of course, Nigeria should be too big to understand the role of France in all of this. And somebody was asking me the other day, was saying, come on, what of Britain in this whole discourse? If these Francophone countries are bringing in France and then France is trying to bring some spoon into the meal that is being cooked, why don't you also deploy, Britain to come and get another spoon also to mix the whole, soup? But that would be very childish, as far as I'm concerned. You know why? Britain, as it is now, is having all their hands full with Brexit.
Absolutely.
That's one. Two, Britain in the whole of European Union, diplomacy, it still retained their pound sterling. If you recall, they were members of the EU. EU had one single currency, which is the euro. But Britain chose to retain that very strong currency, and it was strongest in all. Now, what lesson are we going to learn from there?
Okay.
The lesson is, while we are safeguarding our economy, keeping our naira, moving towards the diplomatic discussions about ECO, we are also watching the tracks and then asking people to come to the table. Let's discuss the criteria. Convergence. We need to meet this convergence criteria. If you don't meet it, sorry, no game. And of course, if eventually France says, well, for several years this discussion has been on, nobody has met the criteria, will you go back to CEFA? Well, let us go back. Or if you want to now accept, maybe Ghana will want to join them in the ECO, and they say, would they adopting ECO? So, okay, this ECO is either we say, this ECO was not, a product of Ghana and UMOA. It was a product of ECOWAS, a combined strength of all the 15 member countries. And in this communique that I have here, which is a legal document, all the member states presidents, in fact, 13 member state presidents, heads of state, attended the meeting, and 2 ambassadors. It was Guinea, Bissau, where there was election, and Mali, where there was problem, that sent the ambassadors. All the other 13 members. So this becomes a legal document. Therefore, if they do not want, if Ghana wants to join them, so good. Of course, we know the antecedents of Ghana.
Now, we are sustaining the conversation, which is all over the place. This is a different leg to it. Now, from the picture Ken has painted, there's a tendency, if you don't have a strong team in the front burner because right now, the way it is now, we are going to have so much high-level engagements, high-level negotiation, high-level conversations, and what have you. And if we don't have a strong, witty team, there's a tendency we may deviate. What kind of team should Nigeria put in place now as a standby team to face all the hurdles?
Nigeria is actually rich in terms of human resource. We are not short of capable hands. And I want to believe that the government will do the needful. They will get the right team, and we are going to handle the situation well. Unfortunately, we are coming across as the laggard here because we are supposed to be at the vanguard of things. We're supposed to be at the forefront. But since this thing has happened, I think Nigeria should look at it and see how they can still benefit from this arrangement. No matter what, we should do what is in the best interests of the country. We should pursue the economic and political and diplomatic interests of Nigeria. No matter what these people try to do, even Ghana that is trying to go behind and adopt the ECO without finally meeting the convergence criteria, without setting the template for how the central bank is going to be, without having the same banking regulations, because we're talking about currency. So banks are supposed to come into the play. So all these things have not been set in place, but they are rushing. Somebody said that maybe they want to punish Nigeria for closing its borders because they are not too happy with Nigeria.
Is that feasible?
Yes, I think it's in a way they are thinking of doing that because
But
most
is it feasible? Is it achievable?
Yeah, to a large extent, yes.
Punish a big guy.
Yes, to a large extent they can because they are coming together now. They are going to come together against us. We are like just a lone wolf now, and there are so many of them with the backings of a powerful country like France. So I think they can do a little damage to us.
Maybe that's when the idea Ken was telling that his friend told him that why not British also come in and try to choke in the pie. Anyway, let's move on. Now, given what is on ground, a lot of persons are worried, they are concerned, they are raising concerns and what have you. Now, where we are, if I'm asking a layman question, let me play the devil's advocate here. As it is, some people say Nigeria should pull out, Nigeria should do this, Nigeria should do this. What would be your advice? What should Nigeria be doing now?
First, Nigeria should undertake a cost and benefit analysis of the eco currency and the processes so far. Not just the economic analysis, the political and social economic status. 2, there should be an analysis of the process so far so that we will now pick up the holes within the processes. And these will now bring us down to the table. Brothers, see what we are doing and see how far we have gone and see the remaining mileage we need to cover. Are we ready to move on so that strategically, in a united form, all of us move together? That's number one. Number 2 is consultations. And I said earlier, we don't need to pull out for anything. Don't forget that if there is anything like ECOWAS today, it is Nigeria. Before ECOWAS was set up or established in 1975, precisely on May 28, 1975, it was Nigeria. Don't forget the Lagos Plan of Action that gave rise to it. So it was Nigeria. And it was our head of state as a dean, General Gowon. So they padded the whole thing and eventually came up with ECOWAS. So, and then ECOWAS is a structure that we have really invested in a lot. We cannot pull out. Now, the process of regional economic integration requires, at a point in time, common currency. And the question that we can also bring back the minds of everyone, including all the 15 member countries, would be, do we have a trade policy, a common trade policy? The answer is no.
Okay.
Common currency, what is it for? Is it meant for eating? No. Is it meant for any political get? No. It is meant for trading. You use currency to trade. Now, for you to have a common currency, it means you must have a common trade policy. Therefore, Nigeria can say, can we see a common trade policy first? That thing, that particular policy for which you are devising an instrument, Let us work towards that. Now, it is that trade policy that will now begin to determine the objectives, strategies, the action plans. And by the time others outside see that you are conglomerating a kind of systematic and systemic vessel for trade, they will go back a bit, because that trade policy excludes them.
Okay.
And what it means is that you are defining the patterns of your intra-trade, which that instrument is going to serve. And therefore, that instrument must carry with it all the resemblance of the service of that particular entity and the structure. And that would define where everybody will be looking for.
Okay. In one of the discussions I had with an architect like you guys, he raised a concern. He said part of the problem is the fact that corruption needs to be checked, even within West African sub-region. That this whole thing that is playing out has some good elements of corruption in it. And I asked, but Nigeria has covered a good mileage regarding the onslaught on corruption. Do you agree with this?
Yes. You know, the ECO is not like the silver bullet. It's not like the magic wand that will solve all our economic problems.
Yeah.
Today, if Nigeria...
Win about it. Is that real? Is that not corruption?
Yes, I think there is an element of corruption, yes. There's an element of corruption. You're not carrying everybody along. There's no transparency. It's corruption.
If Samson sits with Ken and discuss, there's an agreement, and the day after, Samson does it differently what was agreed. Is that not corruption?
Of course it is.
Do you call it intrigues?
Of course. What? It's backstabbing.
Okay.
So that's what's happening. And with this kind of mindset, we are not likely going to achieve the goals that we have set out to achieve. Take the convergence criteria, for example. They're actually meant to bring us together. They're actually meant to make our economies better, particularly in terms of in this fiscal space. We have low inflation, single-digit inflation, which is good for a country. You have low debt to GDP ratio. You have high revenue to GDP ratio. And if you look at most of these criteria, Nigeria is lagging. So it's an opportunity for us to strive to make sure that we achieve these things. And unfortunately, only Togo, has achieved most of this, particularly the primary convergence criteria, because the convergence criteria are divided into two, the primary and the secondary. Only Togo has achieved that. It shows that Togo is really fiscally disciplined. And it's something that other countries can learn from. And if we can learn from that and try to follow suit, like my colleague just said, I think the right thing for Nigeria to do is to try to achieve this convergence criteria on its own. Then when Nigeria is ready, Nigeria can call all these countries together and say, how do we come in now? What are the terms for us to be on the ECO so that nobody is being looked down upon? And with our position, having 2/3 of the economy, our importance, our place is meant to be special. Everybody is special, of course. But when you have somebody that is 2/3 and you have 14 other countries that make up like 30%, you alone, you're more than twice everything they can contribute.
Okay.
So you are going to carry a lot of weight, and if you are carrying a lot of weight, that importance should be given to you. That special place at the table should be given to you.
Okay. Ken, back to your constituency, which is the National Association of Nigerian Traders. What does your association stand to gain or lose in all this? And what kind of composure should you be putting up now so that you don't lose completely or gain in totality?
I think it goes beyond what a particular constituency would gain or lose.
Well, your key to this.
Are you key
to this?
Yes, sure. Okay. It rather has to do with what the nation and the region, would either gain or lose, depending on where the pendulum goes. And specifically for traders, I said earlier that common currency is an instrument that will help seamless trade. And by the way, you must understand this. There is no country in West Africa where you don't see Nigerian traders calling the shots in terms of commerce and transactions. In fact, the last analysis that was done shows that 79% of all trading transactions, commercial transactions in the whole of West African region are commanded by Nigerian traders. And that's why everywhere you go in all the markets in the whole countries, not only in West Africa, but in all the whole of Africa, you see Nigerian traders are the ones calling the shots. So if that is the case, it means that the common currency would be doing a good service to us, not only as a constituency of traders, but also as Nigeria. But it goes beyond that, because whatever you gain today as a trader with that currency can be taken away by, with the left hand with any fall in any macroeconomic policy or shortfall. You know why? Because one policy will kill your monetary venture.
Okay.
And whatever you've gained will just be melted there. And that is the reason why the most important thing is for the CBN, for the Minister of Finance and National Planning and budget, would need to come together, come up with a team that will begin to look at this, just like what happened during the AFCFTA discussions. And all the African continent, the countries in Africa were throwing eyes and fingers on Nigeria, saying Nigeria is, delaying movement or AFCFTA and all of that. It's the same thing that happened during the EPA, that Nigeria was becoming an elephant in the middle of the road in the discussions. However, whenever Nigeria comes in to play, and don't forget, very clear, it was manifested very boldly on the 7th of July in Niamey when our President Muhammad Buhari signed the AFCFTA finally. That was when the whole world, the whole globe knew that AFCFTA had been signed.
Okay.
All this while other countries were signing, nobody understood. Nobody took it up. Seriously. It was when the largest economy signed, they now knew that business has started.
Okay.
And I think
before we tie up this segment, let me ask Samson. In all this, we know the intricacies there, the economics, all that they play. Which way forward, finally? So we couple.
All right, I think...
experts in all this. Well, if I keep you and Ken here for hours, it will be there for us.
I think Nigeria is the biggest economy on the African continent, not only in West Africa. And because we are the largest economy and we have the biggest population, we are the leader. And as much as possible, we should always lead. We should not wait for others to force their decisions down our throats, like what happened to the AFCTA and now to the ECO. We have this, where it seems we have penchant for coming to the party late. I think we need to desist from that. We should always be at the forefront of anything that is happening. And if we have wind of anybody or any nation trying to upstage us, or trying to backstab us, we should try to mitigate things. We should not wait until when things are out of hand, then we start wailing and we look like crybabies. We should, as much as possible,
it's always a pleasure
be the leader. Yes.
Gentlemen like you. Let me start with Ken. Ken, expert on regional economic integration, ECOWAS consultant, trade lawyer, and president of Nigeria Traders Association. Good to have you on the it does not have you on the program, please.
Thank you very much, Omni.
Okay, and also Samson, thanks so much for your thoughts. I will believe that maybe some tensions would have been stemmed regarding all, because a lot of Nigerians are worried which way to go, what do we lose, what do we gain. Well, hope it's not lost all the same. Nigeria remains the biggest economy for you, with 65% in across board. You have called Nigeria the big brother, even if they're trying to fest on it. Well, our survival instinct is very, very firm. That's it on this segment of Insight. Up next on Insight is the media review segment. Don't go away.